Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law, and today's guest is Professor Margaret Hu. She is the Davison Douglas Professor of Law at William & Mary Law School. Now, listeners may realize that is not only my alma mater, but where I worked for 20 years before I came to St. Mary's. And Davison Douglas was my most beloved professor and the dean when I was vice dean. So I am especially proud and pleased to talk to you, Professor Hu, and that you hold this marvelous chair for this wonderful man.
Thank you so much. That's such a lovely introduction. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, you have been at, Washington and Lee before you came to William & Mary. And now that you are at William & Mary, in addition to holding the Davison Douglas Chair, you are director of the Digital Democracy Lab as well at the law school. And so why don't we just start with what your scholarship interests are and what your legal career was like before you entered the academy and your transition to William & Mary?
Thank you so much for that question. So I first started in the Civil Rights Division through the Attorney General's Honors Program, and it was the day before 9/11. So it was September 10th, 2001. And
Oh my
immediately,
goodness.
I know, it was really a tough time to start, and a lot was going on in the Justice Department in trying to address some of the challenges after the terrorist attack. So immediately they created a post 9/11 task force and invited me to be a part of that. And that's really how I became interested in AI and data analytics and these types of data-driven systems, because the government immediately started to utilize these types of technologies in trying to combat terrorism. And so in the 10 years that I spent at the Justice Department, I served as a policy liaison with the Department of Homeland Security and also at times with the White House Homeland Security Council. And then the work that I did in the Civil Rights Division often focused on the civil rights issues and civil liberties issues of the types of data analytics systems that were being adopted by the Department of Homeland Security. And so thank you for that question about how did I become interested in AI research. It's because of the 10 years that I spent in the Justice Department in the Civil Rights Division. And so when I started my journey into the academy, I was asked, what type of research agenda are you going to adopt? And I said I wanted to focus on data surveillance and data analytics and AI and cyber. And I was basically told, this was back in 2009, 2010, that the field didn't really exist in the legal academy quite yet. And my mentors encouraged me to find another path for my research. And
Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah, they were
Yeah,
like,
you
no.
you were just ahead of the game in so many ways.
They said, really, you need to, if you're going to get hired as a law professor, pivot and start explaining that you do other research, but don't say that you do data analytics, data surveillance, AI work. They said nobody will understand it. And so it was challenging, actually, to try to embark on a research agenda around, areas and fields that I was told would not be marketable in the market when I was trying to enter in my entry level position. But I was very fortunate that Washington Lee took me on, and now so grateful to be at William & Mary. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Well, that is awesome. And I'm not surprised. Washington and Lee, very forward-looking law school that they brought you on, despite perhaps this a little bit less traditional scholarship area. So it sounds like you didn't pivot, that you forged ahead in this area that was new to the academy, but not new to you in your civil rights and Justice Department work.
Yeah, that's right. I decided, because I knew what I had seen for those 10 years that I'd been in the federal government, and I knew that I wanted to investigate the constitutionality and other types of the legal dimensions of those types of programs. I wanted to just, carry forward on the vision for the research I wanted to do. And I was very fortunate that Dean Ben Spencer, who is now the dean at William & Mary, he was on the hiring committee to Washington and Lee. And he recruited me then, and he recruited me now. So it was really a nice full circle moment to be able to come to William & Mary and be reunited with the person who had recruited me into my first tenure track position.
Oh, brilliant move by Dean Spencer. That's awesome. So now you are at William & Mary, and you are the director of something new, or at least new since I left, the director of the Digital Democracy Lab at William and Mary Law School. And tell us a little bit about what your vision is for that lab and what it's going to do for students in the academy.
Yeah, it's so exciting. It's a pretty new lab. And the vision that I had for it was trying to make sure that we had a very robust conversation on how we could have technological innovation and legal innovation proceed simultaneously to rise up to the challenges that we're facing in this AI economy and the AI age. So, what I hoped with the lab that it could accomplish would be bring in stakeholder conversations between government, the civil society, think tanks, industry, and then researchers in the academy. So I wanted to make sure that we were building bridges and fostering the type of deep communication that I thought was necessary in order to come up with these types of prescriptive pathways forward in the AI age.
Very interesting. And I know you are deep into thinking about AI policy. So that lab will be, I imagine, a very exciting sandbox for you and other stakeholders to play in regarding these issues. But you just kept on the path of digging into AI law in your scholarship and now have published AI Law and Policy with Aspen, first edition, brand new book, exciting topic. And I just know that law schools will be really interested to hear about what inspired you in writing the book and what they can find in this book.
It's so exciting, and I'm thrilled and honored that Aspen Publishing decided to take this project on. They actually invited me to think about this project many years ago. I think that some of the first conversations we had was almost 10 years ago. And what we decided to do was they just said, we want you to think about a theory first, a pedagogical method for how you would deliver on, making sure that the students had some type of way to engage in these types of topics. They're so fast moving, they're complicated, they're technical. And so they said, why don't we, instead of thinking about the book project first, let's think about a theory first. And so what I wanted to do was then think about, what do I think would be an effective pedagogical theory for teaching AI law and policy in the classroom? And landed on deciding that I really wanted to use a constitutional law lens. And just as when you're teaching constitutional law, you're helping the students understand that it's such a dynamic field, and any given term, the Supreme Court justices can debate and have this very deep and sometimes contentious dialogue on how to interpret the Constitution. But we always start the class by talking about first principles, and we go back to the history and we start to understand what are the values of the Constitution that we can all first visualize before we get into the weeds of any given debate. So when they said, why don't we create this new casebook on AI law and policy? And they said, we'll give you 5 to 10 years to execute on it, but first come up with a theory. I thought what I really wanted students to do is think about those first principles of the Constitution. And then when looking at all of these recent developments in AI law and policy, to ask, are these consistent with our constitutional republic and our rule of law structure, or are they not? And what are the stress points? And what are those pressure points that we really need to analyze very carefully to make sure that we're preserving our commitments to those values in our constitutional system?
I think that's really brilliant that you came up with that framework, because at least it gives some guidance. I mean, I think if students don't have a framework like that, whether it's constitutional law or some other framework, it would be very difficult to assess what the stress points are in adopting more of these technologies in the law and in society. So when using a constitutional law lens, what are the primary stress points that you find and that students engage in with this book and when you're discussing these issues?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because what I really wanted students to think about, what are common values in an AI world or in the age of AI. And what I wanted to then emphasize in the opening chapters of the book are the principles that are found in the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights that was published a few years ago. And what I explain in chapter 1 is that I'm trying to take this historical approach where we're witnessing the birth of a field. And because it is being born simultaneously as these technologies are being born and as the law is being born, it makes it very difficult to wrap our heads around where is the status of the law. So what I say in chapter 1 is rather than focus on the status of the law, let's focus on what we can consider to be first principles. So your question was like, what are those first principles then? And so in the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, it articulates principles such as the need to have safe and effective systems, the need for some transparency and explainability, the need to make sure that we don't have systems that discriminate. So to be free from discriminatory automated decision making or algorithms, the need to make sure that we instill a sense of privacy values in the way in which we're rolling out these technologies, and to make sure that we have human oversight and that we have the ability to have some type of control over the systems that insert humans into making sure that we have some alternatives and always making sure that we center the technologies on humans and humanity.
Wow, that's a lot. I was taking some notes. I don't know that any of those things would be a surprise, although putting them all together, it's a pretty comprehensive list of things we want to make sure that AI will do. The first thing that jumped into my mind, though, is when we're reading about AI and it's some of the flurry of concern that some people have out there, they talk about how the LLMs, and I know like not even enough to be dangerous, so forgive me if I misstate my question, but they talk about how LLMs have these black boxes and like we don't always know what comes out or what they're using to come out with whatever answer that we get. And so I guess my question to you based on that Bill of Rights is how then can AI be transparent if there is this kind of black box that we can't see into when it's making its decisions?
Yeah, excellent question. And I think that what we really need to emphasize is the methods that we're adopting to build the systems in the first place, making sure that we have transparency in the methods, in the data, and the tools that are being built, the algorithms that are being built. What is the nature of the LLM? How is it fed? How is it being curated? And have consistent monitoring. And to the extent that we are building systems that might have detrimental impacts or might adversely impact our fundamental rights, our civil rights, or our constitutional rights, then I think that we need to be very careful about building in ex ante options rather than having everything ex post. So being preventive and being very careful before the deployment of the systems, especially if they're going to have some type of adverse impact.
And so for the AI that already exists and the LLMs that have been created prior to the AI Bill of Rights and the country and the world being ready with policies to govern these systems, aren't we playing catch up in a lot of ways to overlay these rights that you're talking about with systems that are already in place? And how do we address that as a marketplace and a legal system?
Yeah, I mean, once the genie's out of the bottle, how do you put it back in again? And I think that that's been really challenging for creating some type of remedial structure. Once it's deployed, then can you backtrack and try to solve problems after there's the proliferation and wide adoption of these AI systems? And I think that that's why the law needs to take a more active role in building in those safeguards before the deployment. And I just think that that's something that we would just need to insist on and try to enforce. A lot of companies are adopting these AI ethics frameworks and principles for how they're going to guide their system development and deployment. But I think that looking at, for example, the EU AI Act and the ways in which they're categorizing certain types of risks as unacceptable risks, that there are certain systems that should never be deployed, that there's just too much risk surrounding them.
I was going to ask you, is anybody ahead of the US? So the EU has this AI Act that indicates to me or it infers to me that they are ahead of where the US is on these regulations, but I may not be informed of where the US is.
Well, I think that what is really something that I struggle with is the way in which, for national security justifications, there's a sense that we need to make sure that we stay ahead of the rest of the world in our innovation policy for geopolitical dominance in AI. And it's referred to by many as this AI arms race or the AI Cold War. And what I really, as somebody who studies national security, would like for people to start to visualize is a world in which which it's not that type of zero-sum game. That, in fact, there are some experts out there, including Senator Warner, the senator of Virginia, who has said that the failure to try to have this legal innovation proceed simultaneously with technological innovation is going to endanger us in our national strategy over the long term. So that's something that I've been trying to really focus on in my research, is helping to educate people why. Why is it that the rest of the world are adopting these very strong, robust AI strategies, and the United States is going in the opposite direction, a devolution of its AI regulations, and under this purported justification for national security? And I'm just very, very concerned that we are falling behind, and not only falling behind legally, but that it will be to our detriment in our national security policy.
Right. The genies will continue to be out of the bottle in the technological development if that's what we focus on. So let's get back to the book. And I mean, it's just so interesting and just a fascinating topic. And you're obviously an expert just having this conversation. But is this the kind of conversation that you see happening as a result of the book? And tell us a little bit about the benefits for faculty and students who adopt the book.
Yeah, I'm really so excited about this because I really hope that it will be widely adopted and used. I really hope that we're going to have the type of tools and curricular innovation in the classrooms, and not just with this book. I'm excited to see everyone else who's also trying to create materials pedagogically that can advance a very informed conversation at law schools and elsewhere, because I think that democracy needs it. And I think that what we really need to think about, especially using the opportunity of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence that's coming up, to think about the way in which our founders really also struggled with trying to create a scaffolding of values and ideas and governance structures and separation of powers and checks and balances and the social contract. They were trying to negotiate so much, but also in a time of a lot of technological upheaval during their era. And I think that if we can see ourselves as needing to build the type of framework of commitment to shared governance and self-governance and try to protect autonomy, dignity, freedom, all of these, values that we hold dear in our democratic republic, then I think we can better navigate the types of challenges that we're about to face in this very destabilizing, disruptive AI economy. So I really hope that people will see each one of these chapters in each part of the book. So there's 28 chapters and it's divided into 5 parts, that each one of them help to serve that goal of solidifying our mutual commitment to a democratic system. So the first part of the book is laying the groundwork of what do we mean when we talk about AI, the definitions, what do we mean by AI governance? And then I go through many of these pillars of the AI Bill of Rights, such as transparency and privacy and human oversight. And then part 2 is a sampling of some of the frameworks, statutory frameworks, regulatory frameworks, both here and abroad, that we're starting to see develop. Then part 3 is a focus on constitutional law and public law. Part 4 focuses on private law. And then part 5 is the future of AI law and policy. So that's where we talk about AI in the legal profession, AI ethics, national security, AI in labor, AI in educational research, and then climate change, and also just national security issues.
Given that we only have a half an hour, I'll just pick a couple of those things that you mentioned. Sounds like a really excellent way to structure the book. But if we're looking at AI moving forward in particular, some of your expertise, as you indicated, is with national security. And we talked a couple minutes ago about your concerns there. What are your concerns, your specific concerns related to national security and AI that the public and our law students should be thinking about?
Well, when I think about some of the most pressing concerns that I find vexing in the research that I do, I'm particularly concerned about information warfare. I'm particularly nervous about cognitive security. So as we have gained more and more military dominance on a traditional battlefield in the United States, I think that many of our adversaries feel that they've been forced to fight in these very gray areas in non-traditional battlefields. And I think psychological operations and psychological manipulation are one of the ways in which they think that they can win and dominate over the United States, because it doesn't take much to destabilize, I think, a community or a society when you're able to infect the internet and social media with memes that then sow discord and exacerbate divisions among us, undermine our faith in our institutions, and also just work to destabilize our commitment and our faith in institutions we hold dear, such as our right to vote. So I do get very concerned about the nature of warfare itself shifting from something that I think has been more traditional and something that we've seen that we can really dominate through traditional military means, for example, or traditional intelligence gathering. And now it's, I think, evolving into something that is much more difficult. And I think that the cyber attacks and the sort of basically information pollution that they're able to create, especially with generative AI and the types of ways in which you can infect information ecosystems through creating synthetic data, which is not human generated information. If you have the entire internet ecosystem over the web populated with this infected information by our foreign adversaries, how do you clean that up? And especially if that's being scraped and fed into these LLMs, then you're just creating more and more pollution. So those are some of the concerns that I have about national security and AI.
What an interesting term to use for this pollution. And I think just a perfectly descriptive term. You're right. Once the false information goes in, then it just builds on itself and spreads even further. Definitely a virus of sorts. And how do you get it out if the LLMs keep using it? As far as AI algorithms, where do you see algorithmic discrimination fitting into some of these stresses and these problems and the need for policies?
Yeah, that's one of my greatest concerns. And that really is part of where my interest in this area began, because in 2008, I was made chair in the Civil Rights Division of a task force that studied these types of issues and the disparate impact and the types of ways in which people across many sections of the Civil Rights Division were being impacted technologically through the adoption of these systems. And I think that it's really important for our policymakers not only to look at the laws that we have on the books for how to enforce and protect against these types of discriminatory impacts, but I think that we really need to think proactively. I think we need to really think about, for example, creating what is often referred to as AI inventories and algorithmic databases, where there's more transparency about how the algorithms are being built and the ways in which they're being used. Because I think that if we don't assess it at the front end, then it's very hard to understand the impact on the back end. So we need to, I think, insist more on understanding the way in which they're being deployed. And I think asking individuals to, and companies and government agencies, to consider the way in which they procure systems and the way in which they're asking for that type of information before they purchase or adopt or deploy systems.
So as a nation, are we working on this? Is Congress working on this? You mentioned that the corporations, the private sector is working on compliance with some of these foundational values that we have. But where else is the work happening?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some really fantastic proposals that have been generated. You've had the Algorithmic Accountability Act proposed in the House, and you've had hundreds, basically, at this point, AI laws that are being proposed to try to rein in some of the excesses and the harms and the risks of the systems. But as far as actually implementing statutory, anyway, guardrails, you have the Colorado AI Consumer Protection Act, which I think has been held up as a model by many. It is very much following the idea that you can isolate high-risk AI systems that do have this type of algorithmic impact or some type of discriminatory impact that's AI generated, and then impose consequences on those that are not following the proper protocols or the best practices or the necessary safeguards in order to try to prevent those systems from having that type of discriminatory impact.
The AI Law and Policy Casebook through Aspen that just came out and that we've been discussing is something you mentioned a professor might use in a seminar. What other uses do you recommend this book would be appropriate for?
Yeah, I think that this book can be used for a wide range of purposes. And so several individuals have come forward and and shared how they're using it. So in addition to the traditional law school classroom for an AI seminar or a survey course, I do think that some people are starting to use some of the chapters for training purposes. So there's one university that is now offering an AI minor, and they said that they're in the process of training all of the faculty in their College of Arts and Sciences about, making sure that they have a common vocabulary on what they mean by AI studies. And so they're taking the chapter on the definitions of AI, and my definitions chapter, which is chapter 2 in the book, gives a range of excerpts of how AI is defined across multiple different types of scenarios. So statutory definitions at both the federal level and the state level, but definitions within regulations and government reports and by companies, and just trying to show how government agencies have been defining AI. So that chapter has been used to help train faculty who are now involved in this project of offering an AI minor, but also they're using the final chapter on AI and humanity and sustainability, and using that to help faculty understand the stakes and the consequences, and thinking longer term about why we need to integrate a very solid AI curriculum into higher education.
So if there are faculty out there who are interested in these topics and think, boy, maybe I could teach a course like that, but I don't know enough about AI, and this is daunting to them, what recommendations would you have, and how would you share that the book would be helpful to them?
Well, we just in the last couple of days have now completed the teaching manual and the PowerPoint slides that accompany each one of the chapters. All 28 chapters are now available through Aspen's faculty portal, and we are also offering technical support. We have a sample syllabus, and several faculty have asked me to work together with them to craft a syllabi examples that fit the particular needs that they have for that type of course. So, for example, a faculty member has come to me and said, I really want to focus on privacy law, data transparency, or somebody else will want to focus on cybersecurity and data types of protections. Other faculty have come to me and said that they really want to focus on intellectual property. A couple have focused on national security, but in each one of these instances, I'm able to point out to them the chapters and the types of readings that I think will be really specialized for their needs. And then other faculty members have come to me and said that they would like to work together on having a customized version of this book in other settings. So business faculty have come to me. There's one business law faculty member who wants to customize this book for an AI ethics and audits course. There's one chapter, chapter 25, that focuses on AI ethics and audits, and they want to focus on helping the business students understand AI risks in a corporate environment. And other faculty have said that this could be customized for a school of journalism, a school of engineering, and a computer science department, that it can be used in public policy school and international affairs class. And I just think that there's some really exciting ways in which this could be very helpful to a wide range of professors.
Absolutely. That sounds like a really broad cross-section of topics and schools and professors who could use this course or this book in their courses, or excerpts from the book in their training. So again, congratulations on AI Law and Policy, a case book longer in the making than I thought. I thought this had come up much more recently, but how exciting that you've got the last decade that you've looked at as things have developed in AI Law and Policy, and now it is hot off the presses. So if you're interested in the book, you can find it through Aspen Publishing, and Professor Hu has suggested that she's available to faculty who are interested, and she also has a Substack where she talks about some of these topics as well. Now, Professor Hu, before we finish, I wanted to ask you what I ask all my guests, and that is, what are your predictions for the future of legal education in the coming decade?
Well, I think that AI is rapidly changing the legal profession and the way in which legal services are delivered, and the types of expectations that many law firms now have for their students. And so, in addition to being, I think, such a very consequential area of law, I think it's so consequential to our legal profession and our legal pedagogical methods as well. So my prediction is that more and more law schools will offer AI law courses, and that there will be a wide range of the types of AI and the law courses offered, including how it's impacting the legal profession and how students can have the skills in AI necessary in order to thrive and use these tools responsibly and in a way that is a service to the profession and not a detriment to the profession.
Thank you so much, Professor Hu, for talking with us about your new book, AI Law and Policy, and the AI field more generally. And thank you for leading the way in these topics that we're going to be grappling with for decades. I hope that your book and your work helps to train our next generation of lawyers so that they are crafting ethical policies that we can all be governed by.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be a part of this podcast.
All right. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode and want to listen to additional thought leaders in legal education, you can find more episodes on YouTube and your favorite podcast channel. Thank you.